Reality is like a film set. There are directors,
Action!
producers,
Are we on schedule?
and even actors.
Can somebody get me a coffee?
The trick is realizing that you are playing all of these roles. You are the executive producer of your reality. My name is Daniel,
My name is Lauren.
and we're here to break the fourth wall to discover what's behind the scenes. And what you hear just might have you saying, "That's so meta." Good day and top of the morning to you, everybody. This is Daniel with That's So Meta. This is our co-host,
Lauren.
and today we have a very special guest. And I know everyone always says when they have like a guest, it's always a very special guest, but Garrett is a very special guest. And today we're going to introduce a personal friend of mine who's our first live and in person, live and in studio physical guest on That's So Meta, which is very exciting. And today is just a special insight into who Garrett is and our relationship together and kind of what we're working on, okay?
Absolutely.
So, everybody, this is my friend, Garrett Jageman.
Hi guys, how you doing?
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on the show, and look forward to digging in together and talking about some exciting topics.
Yeah, man, some fun stuff. As everybody knows, if you've watched this show or if you're new to it, this is a metaphysical sort of, metaphysical context, sort of metaphysical content-driven show. And when we talk about metaphysics, it's one of the most exciting topics in the world to me because when you really dive into the science behind it, it's life-altering, And that's why I wanted to bring Garrett on the show today, because we're going to get into that as well, on how I've personally seen Garrett, go through a spiritual transformation and a spiritual evolution that is totally sort of black and white for me, okay? So I'm going to start in a little bit on how you and I met, but jump in at any point, cut me off, fill in the blanks. In 2015, I moved up to Pittsburgh, and I had been working and still am working as a full-time videographer and a filmmaker. So the first thing that I wanted to do in order to start finding work and business in the area was I tapped into the music groups on Facebook, because that's a good place to market and advertise a video service to musicians. And I made a post, and it was like literally right away, Garrett was the first person to respond to my post that I was offering a music video service. And I was posting, examples of my work and looking for people that might be interested in hiring. And he was the first one to respond, and he saw some of my stuff and liked it right away. And so I think you and I booked a music video together because you were a rap artist in Western Pennsylvania, and you were, an entrepreneur in a lot of ways and running your own business and doing so many things towards your music and your brand, that getting into the video side was like the next step for you in that journey. It was like the next rung, in the ladder. And so you booked me for your first ever music video, which I was honored.
Yeah, it was a good time.
It was a good time, and we did this like horror film. It was like a psychological horror film because your music, was very explicit and dark at the time, and the visuals needed to sort of reflect that. And we had a blast. We shot for like 6 hours in the dark. We had like scenes and like props and fire, and it was
crawling
wild.
Through the woods and
crawling through the ticks,
falling through bushes and all kinds of stuff. But it was a good time.
It was a blast, but we clicked right away. You vibed with like the way I was doing things. You gave me a lot of creative freedom, which, for any artist or creator, having creative freedom to do your artistry, is really important to your soul. And you're like, hey man, and you're like, just do your thing. This is just sort of my ideas, but whatever you make of this, let's just run with that. And it was awesome. And it still holds up to this day as an awesome music video.
That's probably my favorite out of all the ones we've done.
Yeah, dude. It's so good. And then how many over the years did we go on to do?
I think the official number is either 8 or 9 overall. We did, I think, 7 or 8 for myself, and then we filmed the one for fellow artist Dawn Arias.
Yeah.
We filmed at your friend's house with the opening scene. So I believe if you want to count that together, it'd be somewhere between 8 and 9.
Yeah,
which is pretty
awesome.
substantial.
Over several years. Now, over the years, Garrett just kept hiring me and hiring me and hiring me to do music videos. I mean, this guy was like a small portion of my monthly income at one point. And, you know, I was very grateful as an artist to have that. But you and I had always sort of resonated with each other's beliefs and opinions. And we worked together both creatively and professionally really well. And I remember that if you're familiar with like, well, what kind of music would you say it was if you had to put it in a genre? A lot of people equate it to horrorcore, but I know that sometimes you have different.
I always like to call it just hardcore underground rap or hip hop. It gets the stigma and said a lot as horrorcore. But it does have horror elements. I never wanted to consider myself just straight horrorcore because I felt that there's a lot more elements to it than just that. But a lot of people would subcategorize it as that.
Okay, so yeah, so basically it's like really dark stuff, you know, really explicit lyrics, and the stories that he would paint were crafted very creatively, but they were also generally really dark and sort of like content, right? So for horror fans, yeah, that's the kind of stuff that we did.
Well, I remember when I met you, you were showing me a whole bunch of your work,
right?
And one of the first things you showed me was like your videos,
okay,
like a bunch,
and he was
right?
like, "Warning, it is kind of dark, but I made it, and I'm very, very proud of it. Check it out." So that was one of the first things that I've actually seen of the both of you.
Yeah, when Lauren and I
we
met, I used the music videos that I produced for you to impress her.
Yeah,
there you go. See, that worked out pretty good. Is hey, I want to impress you with the work I did with this guy. But no, it was a phenomenal work. I mean, like you said, you reached out. It was very acute timing because you had reached out at a point where I had already been thinking of doing music videos, and that was my next step in the journey. As I said, I just hadn't found anyone that I resonated with on a sense of their creative potential, and I kind of was just shelving it until I found that person, and then all of a sudden I see here's his inbox message, and I clicked on it, and I'm like, oh, that's good timing. But I never have high hopes for a lot of people, sadly, and you had sent a link to your work, and I clicked on it, and I'm like, oh, wow, okay. I'm like, I can get down with this guy. And then we just got along talking, like you said, and then it just led into us doing that first video, and then I think we knew instantly that it was
a good relationship.
It was a good relationship.
Yeah, man. Awesome. And so in that year, 2015, I was pretty deep into the concepts of general metaphysics and extraterrestrials, like aliens. That was my big thing that year. And I had sort of I had gone through my actual, what we call a spiritual awakening in 2012. Okay. And although it might be cliche, like many people, my spiritual awakening came as a catalyst, from trauma. So the catalyst was trauma for me. I was going through a lot of just very 3D difficulties and challenges in my life with medical issues and going through a divorce and working a job I hated, you name it, like all of the 3D fun stuff I was having like 100%. And it was the catalyst to triggering my awakening. But from that point, from 2012 to 2015 was when I was getting into a little bit more complex metaphysics, and then getting into like the extraterrestrial side, because they actually connect. They're integrated very much so. But there was still a lot I had to learn about the meaning of life and how reality works. But I was big into that stuff. And when I started working for you, you were still very immersed in like that, the type of lyrics and the things you were depicting and the horror elements. They were, from my perspective, very unique and very, very powerful and very potent, but they weren't sort of like in the realm of like what I resonated with directly in my personal interests, which were getting more into like studying quantum physics and getting into like how vibration works and stuff like that. And so some of the darker, more dense stuff was maybe a little bit more challenging for me, but also very interesting because I was such a horror fan of horror films. So like in 1 minute I'm studying like how to always have like a positive outlook on things, and then on the other hand we're talking about like slashing throats and like robbing, like running into someone's house and like taking the woman out, and so like but it was fun. It was all very fun because this is all tying this back into metaphysics. Everything is valid and relevant.
And it's a lot of exploring the shadows too.
Exploring the shadows,
darkness.
And he's going to talk about that.
Yeah,
Garrett's going to talk about that.
Well, it's the boomerang effect too. I mean, it's weird, and we'll definitely touch a little bit more base on on it, but the release by being able to release those dark energies and feelings into the music as kind of as a savior to help you disperse those feelings, but then on the opposite end of that coin, by pushing and projecting out that darkness, it attracts more darkness. So for a long time, I'm like, I have so much darkness to get out of me in musical form. I'm a nice guy. No one really sees the darkness. I feel it internally, but I can get rid of it with my music. But then the darkness just kept being there. So I kept thinking this was the tool, this was the ticket to disperse this darkness. But then later on, after I became a little bit more self-aware, I realized that I think I was causing my own darkness. I was getting rid of it only to project it out to come back to me
Reflect
again
more.
and just
Which
just
is the way
boomerang.
law of attraction works.
Absolutely.
And I want to say one more thing, and then I want to turn this over to you, Garrett, is that over a 5-year relationship, business, it became a friendship. And I saw you go through a lot of transformations, which is going to lead us up to what you and I are doing today together. Even now, after all the music videos in the business, it's evolved, or ascended rather. And I've seen a lot of transformation within you. And then I realized that also it's been a reflection of the transformations that I've been going through as well. And the crazy thing about when someone's going through spiritual awakenings or just evolving as a spirit, one of the common things that happens is you start to desync with certain people and certain paradigms in your life, and then you also resync with new people and new paradigms in your life. And one thing that I can say, which is amazing, and I'm so grateful for, is that you and I have always stayed in total alignment to each other. As we've been going through our own respective and unique journeys of self-discovery and expansion of consciousness, you and I are still now tighter than ever.
Absolutely.
And we're doing stuff together now that's totally different than the way our relationship started, and you and I didn't evolve away from each other at any point.
And that's a very important point. Is, I mean, it could have been easy to kind of grow separate
Yeah.
with our own journeys, but it actually, I think, grew us closer together. So
Yeah.
it's interesting.
And like Garrett's one of the few guys that I also continued both a business relationship and a friendship with, even when I moved out of state. Because like, as you know, I've moved like back to Buffalo, to New Jersey, back to Buffalo, back to Pittsburgh. I've done all that. And no matter when I moved or where, we were still doing business and we were still keeping in touch and we were still talking. And now so many transformations have happened. We're still doing it. And now you're right here in my office, in my studio. We're doing a podcast. We're doing a bunch of podcasts. We have a couple.
We do, certainly do.
So this is where I want to start you off today. I have gotten into a point in my spiritual evolution and my journey of consciousness that has been a unique path using metaphysics and studying the concept of aliens and extraterrestrials. That has been my route to the point that I'm at. And you and I are at like a very, very similar point in our journey, yet you took a totally different route to it. And so what I want to talk about today is tell us when your spiritual awakening began and how, and the processes you went through to get to the point that you're at now, which to me is pretty profound, because we also run another podcast we're going to talk about. And I'm often just amazed by the things that you know and where you're at in your journey. So take it away.
Absolutely. As I said, guys, my name is Garrett Jageman, and had kind of a strange and wild journey, over the years, and even touching base on short term with, from when Dan and I met each other to now, the last 5 years has been kind of a wild ride. But to take you back to when I started, the first time I ever experienced anything that opened my eyes to more than what we are shown on a normal everyday basis was around the age of 7 years old. I had my first encounter with the paranormal when I seen a full body apparition in my childhood home. And right then and there kind of snapped me out of like, wait, there's something more than just the regular thing that we see. And it led me down a path over the years of having many more encounters and experiences, which started making me think a little bit differently. And at a young age, early teens, mid-teens, I started dabbling in the occult side of things. And didn't do it responsibly. I would like to make that a point, is that a lot of times people get into the occult thinking they understand what the occult is and not really knowing. It's more of a scene style occult, what you hear the occult is. So I started dabbling around with ceremonial magic and ritualistic magic and beliefs at that point, and studied a little bit, but not near to the level I do these days. And I tried a ritual at the age of 17 years old with a couple friends, and I seen a transformation happen in front of me of a demonic possession, or of a possession, whatever. You don't have to necessarily call it demonic, but then got to see and hear audible things from out of this realm. So that kind of led me into the occult side, but I realized at that point that I was dabbling in things that I didn't fully understand and should be responsible with. It was all cool. Everybody wants to dabble in things and be a badass until the time comes that it works. And then it worked, and then we're like, oh wow, like it worked. That was what we hoped for, but once it actually happens, it becomes real. And I decided at that point, you know what, I'm backseating it. I obtained what I wanted to, but I think that I did it in a way that was careless. So at that point, I kind of still studied. I've always studied the occult. I've always studied the esoteric, but I didn't openly practice. So then I started a company called Brutal Business Entertainment. It started the rap career, started the music, started the modeling, photography, and everything. And did that for years, still read, still studied, but I didn't focus on the spiritual side. And then our paths crossed, obviously. And my spiritual awakening happened around 2017, late 2017. It took me to a paranormal moment that I experienced as a child, but I had this as a dream. It was weird. So, and this is going to sound crazy, folks, but when I was 15 years old, hiked with a friend in the woods. We used to go exploring all the time. We would go into abandoned buildings, do all these things, and we were hiking through the woods, and we stumbled upon a small town, or small village of about 7-8 homes just sitting by themselves in the woods down this hillside. And normally we would always go down and explore places like this. They looked like 1800s cabins, so this like a little house on a prairie type, village. No road in, no road out, just surrounded by woods. But for some reason, something was off, and we didn't go down and explore. I said to him, "Do you want to go check that out? Let's go look at these buildings." I don't think so, man. What do you think, Garrett? You want to go check it out? And I was like, I don't know. Something was just off, and we decided to leave. We forgot about it. I went back several times to try to find that village. Could not find it. And one of the times I had been stopped by a guy in the woods. I don't know where he came from, because I came upon no other farms, no other houses. And all of a sudden I heard, hey. And when I turned around, this guy's in the woods, and he had a shotgun. And he says, "Get off my property. It's posted. You shouldn't even be here." He says, and I said, "I didn't see any posted signs. They're everywhere. You couldn't have missed it." Well, when I left later on, there was no posted signs anywhere. The weirdest thing about this encounter, and I still don't know how to quite put this together in my mind, is as I was walking away, he said, "Tell your brother Jake I said hi." Never met this guy before in my life. I have no idea who he was. Never said my name. But he said clearly to me, "Tell your brother Jake I said hi." And I turned around and said, "What did you just say?" And he just kept walking away. Never turned back around and said anything. Just vanished. Like kept walking up over the hill as a regular person, like an entity or anything. And I've never found it. I've Google Earthed it, tried to find this village. I even years later had messaged my friend that was with me, and all of a sudden he doesn't remember it. He says, I never came across in that village with you. And I said, "Buddy, yes, you did." Went into detail explaining to him this is an encounter. That never happened, Garrett. And I know for a fact it did. Yeah. So the strange thing is I had forgotten about it for years, but in 2017, I had a very, very vivid dream in the middle of the night of this village, and I was back there again. And the feeling and resonance that it left on me upon awakening was profound, and told me that there's something to it that I need to start digging into. And as I started looking and really diving into the textbook material of the occult and really studying, I started opening up a lot of doorways that pieced a lot of things in my childhood, from seeing spirits at such a young age to such interactions, to hearing, spirits speaking to me when I was younger, and always being a little bit different in that sense, to that town happening, to the first time I ever performed a ritual, it working profoundly beyond my expectations, I started realizing, what, all these things I thought were just small individual strange occurrences, all were a part of a much bigger picture.
Right.
And then I just said, what, I'm going to dedicate myself to this. So about 2018, I really started working hard. 2019 really started picking it up, and then it brings us to present day, 2020. My life has changed profoundly. I have, stepped aside from my company. I have stepped aside from my music. I have given up a lot of the things in life that I felt once defined me as a human being, as a person, realizing that those were just external things that I defined myself with, but did not define me. And once I let those go and shed that skin, that's when I really found myself. And I'm happy to say that as of August 2020, I'm fully aware of who I am, or at least to this extent as of right now. There's still much more digging to go. But it's been a wild journey, as you said, from the time we met till now. The transformation is astounding. Night and day. And I was always very aware. I was always someone who knew about spiritualism and knew about metaphysics to an extent. But as I dove in deeper and shed layers, it's like an onion. I mean, as you peel back, it just keeps going and going. And I feel that I'm pretty far into my journey, but at the same time, I'll tell anyone I'm still a beginner. You can never be a master in this field. No matter how much you know, there's always much more to know. So it's been a wild ride, man.
Yeah, and that's a great place to be in. I can tell you that I'm no stranger to shadow work, and I'm not afraid of it. And that's one really big misconception with the New Age community. Anybody that's into like the New Agey sort of spiritual stuff is everything's love and light, but it ain't.
Mm-mm.
It's not like that. And you have to really like lean into your darkness, your darker aspects, and you have to explore them and face them and release them. And I can tell you that the same way that you left brutal business behind in your music and so many other endeavors that like were your not just your brand, but they were your blood, sweat, and your tears for years. As I've gone through shadow work over the past since 2017 until now, which was like a second awakening for me, because I literally believe that I actually died in summer 2017, which you were kind of there for, because I was still talking to Garrett, like I was editing a music video for you. So you do this shadow work, and then as you transform in a lot of ways, you start to realize that like surface level things that were so important to you and had so much value and meaning, you see them differently, and you begin to like let them go. And I have so many ego-based endeavors and pursuits of things that I've been working on since my childhood or since my teens or my mid-20s, because I'm in my 30s now. But like things that meant so much to me that I thought were so important were just ego, surface value pursuits that didn't yield long time, deep, introspective sort of like self-discoveries, other than the fact that paradoxically, through the shadow work and the processes of just having a 3D experience, you learn to let those things go. And then all of a sudden, something that was so important to you for so long, you just drop it. You just release it and let it go, and it's gone. And you shed those things. And I've had multiple of those same things over the past few years, the same way you did, by letting your entire brand.
Yeah, just shedding it. Yeah, just because I think the thing is we try to find ways to define ourselves who we are. I think that we don't feel important unless we give ourselves something to compare ourselves to. So we make these things and say, look at what I've done. Look at what people know me for. Look at what I know myself as. I'm Garrett. I'm Skippy Ickham. I'm the leader of Brutal Business. I have 40 artists under me. I'm known all over the place. That's a great thing. But that's not who you are. And that's, it becomes who you define yourself as. But it's like you try to find a pillar to define you, and that's where the mistake lies. Is you have to, and that's not you. That's just an illusion of who you think you are, who you try to portray, and that's sad that we get lost in that. For years, that is where I was lost. I thought I'd found everything I wanted. I thought I knew who I was and who the world thought I was, but I was putting on a play, I think, for everyone, and it wasn't that I cognitively realized I was doing it. It was, for a long time, I was lost in my own illusion that this is who I am. It is. it's intoxicating. I mean, you just keep feeding it. Like I said, it's the boomerang effect. You keep feeding it, and it keeps giving you back the same thing, and you just keep doing it, and you feel like you're climbing up the ladder, but you're not climbing up the ladder. You're just staying right there.
It's more self-perpetuating reflections, you know, like my pursuits, like I had so many pursuits that I was just grinding on and just hitting closed doors and brick walls and grinding and just getting my heart broken and just doing it and doing it and doing it. And I realized that I was becoming my pursuits that were empty and fruitless and just draining emotionally and mentally and physically and financially. And I couldn't see it though. I was blind to my own, in my own surface value pursuits. And I didn't want to let them go. It was a byproduct of doing my shadow work and discovering what the pursuit really went and what the ego attachment to me experiencing that thing or achieving that goal really meant to me from a higher dimensional perspective was what allowed me to see it in a different light and then naturally allow it to dissolve as something that no longer had any control or power over me, whereas at the time I felt like I was under a spell. Like the things that I wanted to do were part of my total identity. And they were consuming.
They're very consuming, and it's. But I think it's helpful. It's self-defeating though, because like I said, it's helpful, but it's not always favorable. You build up this empire, and you believe it's everything, and then you burn it down, so to speak. But it needs to happen. I think like we were talking earlier before the show. I think that I couldn't be where I'm at now if it wasn't for the journey that I've already taken. You can look at it like, wow, I spent 10 strong years on brutal business every waking second of my life in my art and everything, and that defined me, and how could you just step away and let it all go? What a waste of time. Yeah. But it's not. It's not. I mean, it's much power. And I mean, yeah, a lot of people would look at it like, what a waste, man. Are you so talented? Why would you let that go? I don't think that I could have reached the level of spirituality and opened my mind to the level that I'm at now and have the power that I have now if I wouldn't have went through hell. Right. You have to march through fire to become anew.
And that's the catalyst to my awakening and my journey. And then Lauren, when I met her in, what was it? It's a July 2018.
2018. Mm-hmm.
You had a pretty impressive awareness and understanding of core foundational metaphysics. Mm-hmm. And me being somebody who's so passionate about like what I live, what I walk and I talk, I'm always sharing it with people. And I could talk to you about anything and you would have a general understanding of it, or at least be interested into learning more about that. And I've seen you go through a lot of spiritual evolution yourself over these years, but it's almost in a sense, this is my perspective, please tell me if I'm wrong, but it's almost been less of a seemingly spiritual awakening for you and more of an awakening on some of the more 3D limiting structures that just were not serving you as a person at all. Yeah. And I've seen you just totally shed entire heavy, dense bricks off your back and your chest. Mm-hmm. And you have also just recently quit the 9-to-5 structure, the 9-to-5 paradigm. Do you want to tell us a little bit about like that, like what led you to leaving a 9-to-5 sort of day job and then, where you're at now and what your plans are? Because I just want to say this real quick. One of the big things after I went through my spiritual awakening in 2012, I still maintained my day job for like 8 months. Like maybe 6 to 8 months, I still worked my day job. And from my own perspective, that sort of like 9-to-5 structure, it was very limiting and suffocating to me based on the things that I learned about how reality works. Being stuck in that sort of like time trap was starting to like kill me. Mm-hmm. And that's when I literally got myself fired from my job because I didn't want to quit. But I didn't want to stay working there, so I just fucked off so hard that they literally had to fire me because I was sitting at my desk eating sandwiches and reading books on metaphysics when I should be working. Yeah. And they're like, Dan, you going to do anything at all today? And I'm like, right after this chapter, they're like, okay, just pack your shit, get out. And it's like, thank you. Thank you so much. I thanked my boss for firing me. I looked him dead in the eyes. I said, you know what? You're doing me a favor. I said, you're doing something for me that I couldn't do for myself, and I want to thank you for that as I leave today.
That's very cool.
So Lauren, you left that 9 to 5 paradigm, that structure behind, which is a big thing for somebody to do. Like I told you, it was sort of like, it felt like the 9 to 5 structure was trapping me,
Yeah.
from growing bigger into myself. And so you had ultimately decided to leave a relatively well-paying job. They were flexible with their hours, it was a good company to work for, but it wasn't what you needed, even though it was working.
Yeah.
So talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like you said, it was a totally fine job. I really didn't have very many complaints. I liked the work. I liked all of it, but it was taking too much of my time, and it was mental labor, if that makes sense. So like my brain was always thinking about the job because I was in a position of management, and I had to, it was taking up too much of my head. So when I would come home and I would do, the podcast or something creative, in the back of my mind, I'd be like, okay, but in a half hour, I have to go to work. I have to start getting ready. I have to do this. And it was so draining on not only my mental state, but physically I would get sick all the time going in there. It was like my body was telling me, it's done. Just get out of there. You need to start working on yourself, So that was the only motivation, was just that my body was like, all right, you're done there. The time has passed. Get rid of it. Time to start working on your own thing.
Yeah, because we were doing like all these channeling series. We did like the Awoken TV thing. We were doing like this podcast, and then I was starting to integrate you into trying to like get into money making endeavors for video. Because I think for a long time we were moving you in the direction of replacing your 9 to 5 with something a little bit more freelance and something that you had more in control over, which was helping build the Moment Imaging brand. And that was exciting to you, and you had a lot more interest in pursuing your own business and continuing to work for another company was another big incentive, I think, for you. And it's a big step, like I know that like someday I think you might get to this point as well too. When you find another way to generate your cost of living, you too might leave the 9 to 5 structure. And when you have that much more time though, to just dive into your practices and your studies and your teachings, where you're not going to the 9 to 5 every day generating a lot of money for this other company, that's another step, I feel like, in like the spiritual journey, the spiritual evolution that just for me happened so much earlier. Because like that call center, it was collections for a credit card company, and it was killing me. Like he was killing me. And Lauren had a good job. I think you have a great job. I think you have a great job. Lauren had a great job, but even though it was a great job, it wasn't what she wanted to do. And she left it because that was her mental and her physical health was more important to her than having a stable income, which I got to respect.
Yeah.
It's a little scary.
It was very scary. But I think that another thing was that like I was working in a grocery store. So you were dealing with people all day that just their vibrational density was so much at all times. It was...
Well, you get a lot of, and I use this term quite often in our show and in other talkings and teachings that I give to other people, is I love the term that I coined as just a metaphysical condensation or residue, because that's it. When you work somewhere like a grocery store or somewhere where you're constantly coming into contact with every walk of life and every type of personality and mentality, some good, some bad, some indifferent, each one of them leaves something behind that stays in the wall, stays on you, and it starts to affect your life. And like you guys said, I kind of did something similar, not with my everyday career, which might get to a point of that, but mine was with the label. It became that. Like, as Lauren said, it was every waking moment that I wasn't directly doing something at that second was spent on that. And it should have been on other things. And it was, okay, I have 5 minutes. Let's answer emails. Let's get back to this. Let's work on the next project. Let's promote. Go back to doing something else. Right back to that. And it was nice because I seen the progression of what I was able to build. And it's something that's still around to this day. It's something that, is being pushed and will live on for a long time to come, with other people at the helm of it. But it took so much time that I couldn't dive as deep into me as I wanted to. And if you're distracting yourself from yourself, you never get to know yourself. And that's when I had to make the difficult decision of, I'm walking away. I'm letting it all go. And it was a hard decision. I mean, Yeah, it was the same as leaving a job, except this was not a job that I worked for someone else. This was a foundation that I had built myself, so it makes it a little bit more difficult to look at and say, wow, do I walk away from this thing I built? But it's the best decision I ever made, and I know a lot of people think I'm crazy for it. I feel lighter, I feel good, and I don't regret it. And so many people that I know from that life have messaged me and have talked to me and said, like, I can't believe you did this. This is who you are. And I says, no, this is who I was.
Yeah.
And that's hard for a lot of people to grasp, and I don't expect them to. And honestly, at the end of the day, it makes no difference if they understand it or not.
Right.
But so many people define me as that. So what I set out for is I wanted to be defined as this big artist, and this is what I was defined at. But then I realized, why did I set those limits? I put up the walls of my own prison.
Yeah.
And that's what people define me as Garrett, that's who you are. And I'm like, no, it's not though, man. You're telling me who I am. I don't even know who I am yet, but I'm sure as hell working towards it. And
I love that.
And when I kind of shed that skin and knocked those walls down and seen, wow, there's a world out there. Best decision I ever made.
Love it. Big fan of this conversation. You know, anybody that's listening right now, let us three, you know, be examples to you that you can let go of things that you once loved.
Yeah.
Whether that's people, whether it's a business, whether it's just a situation that you're used to, you can let go of it. And another transformative and powerful way to look at it is that we are, in a sense, creating our own version of reality, each and every one of us. We're all having our own sort of collective version of a subjective experience. And it's not exactly selfish walking away from something that no longer serves you. If anything, it's an active empowerment towards yourself, because you're taking your own power, your sovereignty back by affirming and say, this no longer is serving me. I'm going to let it go, even if I once loved it and I once gave it my heart and soul. It's no longer part of my identity because I don't even know who I am. I'm just journeying through this experience, rediscovering myself in every moment. And that can be hard for people that are a little bit more anchored in that sort of linearity, in that sort of like congruent sort of continuity, that a lot of people might get angry with you. They might get triggered or frustrated with you and the decisions you make for yourself. Okay? But you're doing yourself a service, and you're also doing those people a service by affirming who you are now, who you're not anymore, who you are becoming, and who you don't know you are. And those are all acts of empowerment that you're doing for yourself and other people. It's not an act of selfishness. It's a gift to them, and it's a gift to yourself. And that's why I feel so good about letting go of things that I once cared about but that no longer serve me, even if it broke my heart for a minute. Because it did, and I've cried about it, and I've stayed up many a nights just like looking at Lauren, just like wondering like who I am right now, and who was I the last 3 years? Who was I? And I don't know who I am right now, and that's scary, but it's not a bad thing. I'm just someone new, and part of that process is just learning when to let go and walk away from things that no longer serve you. You know?
Well, I think that's part of the journey, though. I think if we knew who we were, then there'd be no point of the journey. And I think the journey, and that's why I've said this many times, is people, let's give you kind of an example. People want to hike. They want to get to the top of the mountain. They want to see the view. So everyone's so focused on the view that they don't pay attention to the hike. And the problem with that is you skip the hike. You just to the top. You get there. You love the view, but then there's nothing else to look forward to. You're there. You put to the wayside the journey, and the journey is the beauty of it all. Is everyone looks for the bigger picture, not realizing that this is it. And if we knew exactly who we were, it wouldn't leave room to grow. And we should always be growing. As I said, you're never a master in anything like spirituality and ceremonial magic and everything. I meet people that'll be like, I am a master. And I'm like, but you're really not, man. The fact that you said that, I'm like, just makes the fact that you're not. Is you always have room to grow. So, I mean, it's okay to target the end goal. But that end goal will never be an end goal because it'll always continue to shift and grow and become a new end goal.
Change is one of the only universal constants.
That's it. You have to
Universal
look
laws
at yourself.
change.
You have to change because, I mean, even if you reach who you want to be right now, when you reach that, there should be another goal to want to reach at that point. You want to adapt. You want to always take a look at yourself and say, who am I? Is this me? And like you said, it's painful. I had to let it go. A lot of friendships, a lot of acquaintances and business contacts, a lot of things that some understood, some were indifferent, some were hurt.
Yeah. Or angry.
The thing is just like with my music, I told everyone I could have continued and wrote amazing underground music, but my heart and passion wouldn't truly be in that music. So therefore, I'd be putting out a product that I wasn't 100% behind. Right. And I would rather quit and not put out the music, even though I could, than put out music that doesn't have my heart and soul in it. And that's the same with the businesses. I still could have ran it. I could have ran it efficiently and done a great job for years to come, but I looked at it and said, I want time for me. I want to find myself. And if I'm so in thought that I want to do that, my focus isn't on the business. Right. Why would I manage 40 other artists and not give them my heart and soul? Let's find someone who will, and I'll branch off. And like I said, a lot of people agree, disagree. Some just don't understand whatsoever, but that's okay. We each have our own individual journeys, and that was a chapter of mine. Yeah. And I don't regret doing it, but that chapter had to come to a close for many, many other chapters to open up.
I love that you were able to lean into that truth for yourself and to allow change to happen. And you know, I could learn from it, and I've been going through it right along there with you in my own endeavors and my own life as well. And that brings us up to the next big point. Okay. So while you were slowly letting go of Brutal Business and the music and all of your other side projects, you and I were still talking a lot and communicating, because we were even talking about doing another music video. Mm-hmm. But like, you were transforming and you were phasing out of that stuff, and you were clinging to some things longer than others and letting go of other things faster. Yep. And fortunately for me, I feel like I was right there. We almost did one more music video before you let it go. But like, I wasn't attached. I knew that you were going to do what you needed to do, and I was there for whatever happened. And as your businesses were dissolving, you were already, you know, much like an entrepreneur would, the way that the monkey never lets go of one branch until he grabs another one. You were sort of like brewing up these other sort of endeavors, which were more in alignment to who you were becoming and who you are now. Yeah. And one thing I'm grateful for was like, you were right there to start bringing me in on stuff and like collaborating with me. And so you had approached me, and I'm a little hazy on this, you're going to have to fill me in, but you approached me with the concept of doing a podcast together. Yes. Because I think that you were already interested in me and the weirdo stuff that I'm into. And you thought that I'd probably be a good match with the stuff that you were into as well. And so you came at me with this concept for this podcast, and it's called Celestial Oddities, Pair of Normal Guys. Little play on words there. Did you catch that? And so you come at me with this, and what happened? How did our second podcast start?
So, I mean, I had already got into the podcasting with the music scene, and I was doing Uncovering the Underground, which we interviewed artists from around the world. And like a bazillion people. Yeah, bazillion people. I loved the show. It was great. But it was another one of those things I had to let go because just time factor, that I couldn't focus on myself if I was focusing on a million other groups. So during the height of that show, I had really wanted to start a show on the paranormal and the supernatural, and something I definitely had planned to do. Is something I had been, like I said, since 7 years old, I've been involved in the paranormal. And I had investigated for a long time prior to the start of Brutal Business, years of going out to graveyards, cemeteries, historical locations, houses, warehouses, you name it, and doing investigating. And I had a good knowledge on that, and a good knowledge on cryptids, and a good knowledge on all these paranormal topics. And I said, you know what? I'm starting a show. Because for a long time, I kept most of that to myself. The ceremonial magic, the ritualistic side, the paranormal, I just kind of, it's not something you talk about that much. But then as my spiritual awakening, all stemming back to that town or that I talked about in the woods, that dream, something clicked and said, tell them. Stop boarding it up. Let it go. Tell the public. Become a figure of this side. And I started doing that. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to research harder. I'm really going to get involved. I'm going to push my way up to not only being proficient on my side of things in the occult, but maybe get into a couple orders that are involved in that. And along with that, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to talk about these experiences from occult magic to paranormal and supernatural. And I was like, you know, I'm going to start a show. And instantly you came to mind because, I mean, with Daniel, heavy knowledge for yourself as far as the extraterrestrial side, the metaphysical side, spiritual side. I was the opposite end of that. I know about those things, but that wasn't my three strong suits. Mine more was the paranormal, the occult, and the demonic side. So I started looking at that, and I'm like, well, what a cool topic. You always have a couple guys that know somewhat about some stuff, or they're all experts at the same things. But how often do you bring a guy that's just, and I don't want to call myself an expert by any means, but a very proficient in the paranormal, ghost, spiritual side, have someone that's very proficient in the cryptid and alienistic side, and we both know about each other's side, but we have our specialties. Yeah. And we both have very different personalities, but very the same. We click very well, as you said, from day one, and it just was a no-brainer, and that's why I reached out to you and said, hey, we should start this show where we interview people, we talk deep on subjects of topics, we take people's phone calls, we compile a database of stories and experiences from aliens to cryptids to everything in between. And it's been a hell of a ride so far. I mean, it's a fun show. I love it. It's my passion. As I walked away from everything mainly in life, the three things that I kept was my family, obviously, my occult and spiritual practices, and in the podcast. That was it. Those were the three items that I cleaned a slate of 100 things, but I said, I'm only keeping 3.
Yeah,
and it's funny that I said I actually put
me.
3. I kept you, Dan. Yeah. But I did keep 3, and that was it. It was family, spirituality, and our show. And it's been a wild ride, man. I think people resonate with it, and it's a fun show.
I said yes to the offer right away, and then we had some like graphics made, and Garrett hosts like the technical side, like you do all like the hosting of the show and the technical stuff. But we are 50-50 equal parts.
Absolutely.
in the hosts of the show, and it's a lot of fun because I'd say that's so meta. I'm repeating myself, but it's metaphysical and a lot of aliens and stuff. And then Celestial Oddities is more of like the paranormal, supernatural side, which is still a lot of fun because, like Garrett, growing up, I'm somebody who grew up with night terrors and sleep paralysis. I saw the shadow people. I saw the ghosts. I heard the voices. I saw the creatures in the woods. Like, this is a part of my history. This is a part of my core being. Before I had what I call as my spiritual awakening, I was still very deeply immersed into the paranormal and the supernatural. Not just from TVs and movies, but as a kid growing up, having my own personal experiences of this stuff, it's been an interest of mine forever. So this is like a great, fun, passionate thing to talk about on that show that focuses more on those esoteric things. Mm-hmm. So I'd say that these two podcasts complement each other very well. They do. And any of the listeners would probably benefit from listening to both shows for, slightly different perspectives on these topics. And so it's a lot of fun. And we do like at least an episode or 2 a month. And like we already have a bunch of free to listen to episodes that are all like 45 minutes, an hour long. Yep. If anybody is interested in checking it out, it's Celestial Oddities. We have all of our replays on Spreaker.com.
Yep, Spreaker. If you want to search that, that's Spreaker, and you can do that through Spreaker.com or through the Spreaker app in the app market. You can also search us on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play. I mean, you name it, folks, we're on it. We do air a couple times a month. We bring you different
sides. It's live, too. Like this, is live. That's So Meta's all pre-recorded because we edit a lot of stuff out of these episodes.
That's why I'm going to look good on this. They're going to make me look good, folks.
It'd be nice and polished. And then on like Celestial Oddities, like it's a very free flowing, free thought sort of live hour-long thing that's a lot of fun, and I like that difference in speed. Whereas like, being a filmmaker and a video editor, I feel like I have a lot of control over that So Meta, whereas like on that, our other show, it's just very free-flowing and it always goes really well.
I think that free-flowing is a very nice thing because with the paranormal, if you want to experience the paranormal, you can't set limitations. You just have to be free and let it ride. Yeah. So the show kind of bases itself around that there's no pre-planning, there's no pre-recording. It is what it is. It's raw, it's uncut. It is exactly the way that you hear it is the way that it came together. And I think that's important. We let it be 100% genuine from the heart, no second takes. It's our thoughts. And folks, if you are listening and you want to tune into that, go to Spreaker.com or Spreaker app, follow it, like it, share it, because it helps us get up the podcast community rankings, but also keeps you in tune with new episodes as they come out, which will tell you as they drop. And you can talk to us live during that through the instant messenger feature. Something I'm working on coming up is I would like to start the call feature where you can call us during the show, and it would be fun. I mean, you can ask questions and join in, and we would love to have you join in.
And there's a lot on that podcast that we talk about that I don't generally cover on this particular podcast as well. So I'd love to cross-pollinate our listeners and go on there and just read the description of the episode, see if something resonates with you. And also, there are some other aspects of the celestial oddities sort of entity, right? So Garrett and I, we also want to start doing like, we want to start going to conventions with the podcast and having tables set up and maybe doing like small mini docs. I think that you and I have talked about in the past, going out to these things and maybe bringing the camera and doing some video. And then another part that I'm not as integrated in or involved in, but is still under the Celestial Oddities sort of brand, is you do the investigating, correct?
Yes.
Want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so I kind of branched off, as I said, folks. I've been solo investigating for a long time, stepped away from it for a little while, focused on the company, but I really wanted to get back in investigating. I've always had a profound amount of experiences in the paranormal. I am an empath of sorts. I do pick up feelings. I do communicate with spirits more openly and easier than most. So I've always done it on my own, and a lot of people find that to be crazy. They're like, you go to these locations, whether famous, whether local, 100% by yourself. And yes, I go home, I stay over the night. There's graveyards and things that are in the woods that are old abandoned ones that are haunted. I put up a tent. In fact, next week, Friday, I'm setting up a tent in an old historic graveyard from the 1700s, and I'm spending all night by myself. I love it. But I've always done that, and I took a little bit of a break for a while, but when I came back into it, a lot of people said your knowledge of the radio side of it with our show, of all the different elements of the supernatural, your experiences that you've had, your evidence that you've captured and released, what if you got with a team that could help add to that and brought something to the forefront? And I always was like, I just really like doing it by myself. But then I started thinking of the potential of the more people you have in a team, the more you can do, the more equipment you can set up, the more minds that you can have different outlooks from, and the bigger and better places we can go. It's not feasible to go to a place like we're going next month, which is Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. I mean, it is very pricey. It's huge. There's no way one person could cover this building. You might hit 10 rooms that night. There's 300 rooms. So you're missing out on such an amount, whereas if you make a tactical plan and say, you three go here, you two go there, I go here, or vice versa, you cover more ground, you're getting more evidence, you're getting more of an experience. Plus, it's just a great way to bond with other like-minded people. So I assembled a team. There's 6 of us all together. You have kind of a unique dynamic. You have Jen and Sean Bauman, husband and wife. You have Tom and Luke Barker, father and son, and you have myself and my very close friend Michael Bowser. They're childhood friends. So you have 2 best friends, a husband and wife, and a father and son. And it was kind of different. Tom and Luke were a part of Pittsburgh Paranormal Investigators, very big Pittsburgh group for many, many years. They actually chose to leave their group to join mine, which was very humbling. I mean, by no means did they have to do that, but they wanted to give this their all and really focus. Michael was with me back when the original demonic possession happened, and it was something that changed his life forever as far as experiencing it, but he stepped away from it, like totally like, I'm getting the hell away from this. But over years, it resonated, and he said to me, about a year ago, Garrett, I would love to join you for some of these things, because ever since that day, 15, 16 years ago, I've always been fascinated with what happened that night. Yeah. I want to experience these things. Instead of being afraid of it, let's, not so much the demonic side, but let's go out and experience these things. And we took him on his recent investigation, and it was just wild. It was at the Anchorage Mansion in Marietta, Ohio. The entire night, supercharged, event after event after event after event happened. And he walked away from that and said, Garrett, I'm hooked now. Yeah, like, wow. I opened the valve for him a little bit. And that's what we do. And Jen and Sean have been doing this for a while. They have constantly gone to different locations. Their wedding reception was at Hillview Manor, which I was at last night. Or not reception, but their bachelor and bachelorette party was at Hillview Manor, which I spent last night at. So they're very involved in this. So I found people who have a very specific outlook on it, that we're not there to treat the spirits as an experiment. We will still ask some of the questions other teams do, but we're not there just to get a thrill off them. We're not there just to be like, oh, they can turn it on, they can turn it off. No, we want to find out more connection with what exactly happens after death, that some spirits retain and stay here, some do not. We want to, on a different aspect than most, find the historical value. Sure. Several articles we're writing right now. Michael is a journalist. He has a major in journalism, and he's writing up articles. We're reaching out to historians. We're reaching out to town councilmen and borough directors to find out the history of locations, the years it was built, the people that passed away there, cross-checking the names. So a lot of people just go and are like, look, I caught a picture of an orb. No, we want to capture an EVP and say we heard the name such and such on the orb, which correlates to a person that passed away here, and we're painting a picture. We're releasing well-written journal entries, videos, and eventually will be the documentary. So we're kind of taking a different aspect than most. And then the last point on that would be that most of these TV shows, I don't watch paranormal shows, folks. I think they're ridiculous. But that's one thing that separates me from everybody. My team all watches and stuff. I don't. I don't care to ever watch another investigative group out there.
I'll touch on that.
And the problem with that is they portray the spirits in the room and everybody screams and runs from it. The point of us going is we want to experience that. So whenever we're at a place and they say that is the room, that all the crazy stuff happens. Instead of running away from it or finding that poor bastard that gets stuck in it like all the shows portray, I want to be thrown in there. Our team wants to be thrown in. That's where we want to communicate. I'm not there to pretend I want to communicate and then when they communicate, run away like a scared kid. I want to be there to talk to them. Throw me in those situations. Let's talk. So, that's where we take it from, is that, we look at it from a different aspect of how we want to portray the evidence that we gather, how we go about the research, very respectful. One thing I said as a standard right from the get-go is I will take absolutely no disrespect to the spiritual world. So when people go and they're like, I don't think you can do it. Oh, you're not there. Show me you can do it. You're weak. And they try to, provoke. I'm 100% against that. We go in with a very kind spirit and let them know that we are there to communicate, that we are not there just to get a thrill from them. We're not there to treat them as an experiment, like I said, that we truly are there for the purpose only to spend time with them. I actually am very genuine in the fact that I want to make friends with the spirits, that especially Hillview Manor is a place I go often. Last night I visited them. I go there. I know them by name. I sit with them. I bring them things that I know correlated with their past, and I leave them presents. And I talk to them, and when I leave, I thank them for whatever it is they shown or not shown that night. And I will be back to see you again, Mary. I'll be back to see you again, George. Thank you so much. And we have conversations, and we've had some pretty amazing interactions, and that's what we do. So our whole portrayal of the radio shows and the team and investigative side is different than anything I come across in that world. And that's what makes us stand out, is I don't care to be like everybody else. I've only ever wanted to care to be like me or like us.
And that's a good vibe. That's a good flow to be in, I will say that, Garrett, you, my friend, have offered me to come.
I have.
You have multiple times. You've made
I keep trying to get you.
You've made me aware that I'm welcome anytime. And here's the thing. When I was younger, I was into the paranormal shows. Because I remember when they boomed real big in like 2008, 2007, they were like a big thing. Okay. It started off with like Man vs. Wild and like all of those survival shows. And then the paranormal thing popped off and started to be getting really popular. And I started watching, I think, Ghost Hunters on Sci-Fi Channel was the most popular, and it was the biggest hit at the time. Yeah. Super, super big hit. And I remember watching it with my buddies all the time, and then I was getting into investigating when I was younger. And we would go out and do like audio recordings and take some video, and would spend nights in haunted areas and stuff. And I actually did that all the way into like my mid to late 20s. But and I was into like Ghost Adventures and stuff. That was a cool show for a while, back when all of that was still very new to me, pre sort of awakening. I was single, which is rare. And I had met one of the girls who was on Ghost Hunters at a convention. We met there as strangers. And we became friends, started talking, and then her and I actually started dating, and we got into a serious relationship that lasted 2 years. And her having been on that sort of like TV show side, like the TV depiction of paranormal investigating, it can be a little bit different than doing what you're doing.
Yes.
Okay? And you know that.
Yes.
And that's not a stab. It's just the fact of the matter that when you involve television in the film industry, things change.
It sensationalizes anything that it comes across.
Well, it has to. I mean, it adds that flair to it. I mean, they have to have the flair, because if you don't have the flair, it doesn't sell as much, and it's all about sales at the end of the day. So.
And so her and I in our relationship, she was brought to a lot of conventions, and she would bring me as her like plus one because she didn't want to go alone. And so I went to these conventions and I met a lot of like the TV personalities and the celebrities from like shows that you've seen on History or Travel or Sci-Fi Channel. Like I've met them at cons, and they're all actually relatively cool people. Like some of them are really, really great people, and then some of them are like not. They're more TV personalities than they are passionate about ghosts and cryptids. Mm-hmm. They're more actors than anything, and that happens, you know. Mm-hmm. But when being on that side of things, and also seeing the way that being on reality TV had sort of like really negatively affected her life at the time as well, I sort of got out of the whole parascene. Once I saw the parascene from the mainstream perspective, I was relatively turned off by it. It's just, I lost my interest in it, in doing the investigations and paranormal investigating, just because of the way it had been depicted on television. And then meeting a lot of the people who were involved on that side, it just turned me off. So that's when I got out of it. And through the natural evolution of my own life, I started having less personal experiences like I did when I was a kid in the paranormal, and more into like the cryptid and alien and sort of like creature side of things, seeing all kinds of wild stuff in my house, in the woods, on trips. Like having those types of interactions were starting to happen to me more so over than like growing up seeing shadow people and hearing like disembodied voices like I used to. My experience changed into those types of things, which is where my interest just naturally evolved to. So anybody who's new, or excuse me, anybody who has dug through my YouTube channel will see that I did like a YouTube video about Sasquatch and all of my Sasquatch encounters and stuff like that. And that became really exciting for me once those experiences started happening. And so that's where I focus a little bit more of my energy on is like the cryptids and the extraterrestrial side of things, and then also producing my films and stuff. And I'm actually going on a cryptid hunt. Lauren and I are going on a cryptid hunt with a friend of ours from Los Angeles, just flying in, and we're doing Ohio and West Virginia, which West Virginia has like 6 or 7 like noteworthy cryptid locations there, you know, sightings over the years, all different kinds of stuff. And so we're just going to run around and see what happens and have fun with it. But other than that, I don't really go out in the field much anymore. I like doing the shows. I like making the media and doing the audio and visuals, but I don't really go out on the field much anymore. So other than that, I'm glad that you are, because we still need good people like you that have good intentions, that are out there, not only just doing their research and collecting stories, but also keeping a positive perspective on the community as well. Because like I said, man, when you get into the mainstream side, it's pretty toxic.
It is. And I mean, I want to eliminate myself from that. And as I told my group, there's so many things that we've caught on film that are amazing that are not real. And what I mean by that is the light happened to hit a mirror that bounced off a wall, that bounced off of something else. And we've seen things that certainly look paranormal or supernatural. And my team's like, oh my God, Garrett, look at what we caught. Not real. And they're like, well, sure it is. I'm like, no. There was one in particular at the Bel Air Shadow House in Bel Air, Ohio, that it was amazing. It would have been an amazing release. We could have fooled everyone with it. It wasn't real.
But you're fair about your findings and your evidence.
I kept telling them, and everybody's like, no, Garrett, that's not, no, that's real. We looked at it again and again and again and again and again until I showed them, and finally they seen it, and they're like, you're right, it's not. And I'm like, I know. I will go through 1,000 times to prove it's wrong before I can prove that it's right. But that 1% that comes out of it is gold. And when I present that to the viewers and to the fans, know that everything you're getting is 100% to the best of our knowledge and ability, 100% accurate, factual evidence.
Keeping it honest, and I respect that.
Yeah, and there's so many people I know that'll have things happen that aren't real, and they're like, well, you know what, let's just throw that in there for filler content, and they'll love it. No one has to know the difference. I'll never do that. I'll never sacrifice my integrity for popularity. I don't need the popularity. Folks, I've had it. I had it for years. I don't care if anyone knows me for it. I do this solely for myself. Secondly, for my group. Third, for you guys. And that's the way it'll always be, is I'm there to find out the difference between us and the spiritual realm, narrow it down, and then release the actual best cream of the crop material.
I like that, and I'm gonna end this topic on one more little fact bomb here. Maybe I shouldn't say it, but one of the bigger things that turned me off about the mainstream, TV in paranormal and cryptozoology was that if you watch them shows, you invest a lot of time watching the entertainment aspect, because there's like 1,000 different monster hunter and ghost hunting shows, bazillions in different countries too. Well, I found out, by working, inside the scenes, was that when they actually do capture something, okay, on these shows, they're often given a choke order not to release it, and it will never make the final cut of the episode. So maybe here and there they'll tease like a Bigfoot call, or they'll tease like one little frame of like a creature coming out of a cave or something like that ultimately doesn't lead to enough conclusive evidence to prove that there are any creatures out there. It's because they're not allowed to. Okay, so what you're watching is a lot of smoke and mirrors and a lot of hype and a lot of entertainment, because that's all television is. It entertains you. Okay, and then anything that they do find out there in Zimbabwe of fucking monsters crawling out of tunnels and shit, it's never going to make the air.
Yeah, you'll see a slight bit of slivers of it, enough to keep your piqued interest to watch the next episode, because it ends with "to be continued," and you're like, oh, we got to watch next week, only to not get it next week either, just to slightly get things, and then it never ends. And it's always, people always say, well, if Bigfoot's real, well, how come there's all these shows and 1 million episodes and they never catch anything? It's because they probably have. Yeah, they probably did. And the fact is, too, I mean, we've talked about it on the shows, they're very sly creatures that are not going to be found very easily. So in a slight chance that you do find them, it's usually never going to come out. And there has been many captured evidence. I mean, there's a lot of people who have come forward and said that they've captured amazing things that were confiscated and taken away from them. So, I mean, that is very true. And on a spiritual realm, I think that they can show more ghosts than they can cryptids. Right. I think people don't bat an eye as much. You show them a visual of a full-body apparition, some people still won't believe it, even though I don't know how you fake it. But people are like, oh, it's a ghost, that's crazy. But when it comes to cryptid and monsters and creatures, and you show them that, people are like, whoa, wait a second. And my reality just got flip-flopped, and they can't handle that. So they do take that away from us and keep that hidden. But ghosts, for some reason, seem to be that weird. I think it's just as valid, but for some reason, we don't look at it that way. You ask most people, they might believe in ghosts, but as soon as you ask them if you believe in cryptids, okay, are you silly? But wait a second, you believe in demons and ghosts? Of course I do. But you don't believe in Bigfoot. Psh, that's silly talk. You know what I mean? And it's like, I mean, they're both equally as unfathomable, but they're both equally as real. So it's strange. But like you said, a lot of that is red taped and kind of pushed to the side.
Well, guys, as we're wrapping up here, Garrett, I want to thank you for your friendship.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your friendship as well, Dan.
You have been involved in my personal life, and I have been involved in your personal life, and we've always been very accepting of each other and respectful of each other's beliefs. And I'm grateful to synchronistically have our beliefs in alignment. Absolutely. And maintain a solid friendship and continuing to doing creative and expressive endeavors as we do. Because I can tell you, man, when we do our podcast together, we're just having fun. We just love it. We're just talking. We always feel great when the show's over. And, we're only doing things that we like to do now, which is why I let go of so many of my ego pursuits, and you let go of so many of your ego pursuits, and you're chopping away the chaff and mining through the dirt and the rocks to find the gold. And you and I still have a friendship, and we're still doing stuff together.
I think it was meant to be that way, man. Honestly, like you said earlier, is it's crazy to think we came from this to here, thinking that would separate us. But as it said, it brought us closer. And I feel that maybe that's part of the plan. Yeah. Is we thought the plan was that it was entertainment and it would lead to this, but maybe the plan all along was to lead to us furthering, all three of us even, us furthering our opening of spirituality. Is even though we do have different pursuits, I'm a very left-handed path, you're a very completely different right-sided path. It's all helps each other, because there's things that you're going to resonate from my side and vice versa, and from Lauren's side, and it's gonna be helpful to all of our growth, and I think that's important. So it's It's all part of the bigger scheme.
Right on. So is there anything else, guys, we want to close with before we end this episode? I know we broke the hour mark, but that's good. Good.
Yeah.
We can certainly talk, folks. Make sure you check out Celestial Oddities, Pair of Normal Guys podcast and Oddworld podcast, both under the name Celestial Oddities. Check out Celestial Oddities Paraseekers, and obviously check out this show and click the like, share, and follow buttons. I guess.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you said that because I don't say that enough. Guys, like, share, follow, comment, and we will go ahead and end this awesome interview and meeting of friends with our signatory. That's so meta.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys. Thank you for having me on.